Well, friends, I thought I would have a birth story to share for this week's video, but no such luck. I am in fact still pregnant. I've been having prodromal labor where I get contractions 24/7, but they're unproductive. So instead, I'm going to share some of what I've been up to in my kitchen this week as I wait for baby, and my top tips for succeeding at doing a pantry challenge or no spend challenge where you don't buy groceries for a set amount of time, whether that is 2 months or a year. And if you're interested in participating in a pantry challenge, my friend Jessica over at Three Rivers Homestead is leading one for the months of January and February, so you can get more information over on her channel. My tips are going to be practical, even if you're in a busy season of life, actionable, you'll be able to go do these things right now, and I'm going to be sharing some recipes that will make staying out of the grocery store so much easier. If you're new here, I'm Stacy, homeschooling and homesteading mama of 7, on a mission to ditch the grocery store and become more self-sufficient. Subscribe to our channel to learn more about our journey and how we are making that dream come true. Tip number 1, get into a habit of continuously making your staples. Over the past year, we've been trying to stay out of the grocery store, and the thing that always gets us is convenience. We all know that ingredients don't do you any good unless they're converted into meals, and that can feel very overwhelming. I can't tell you how many times my kids have said, "We have no food in this house," even though there are enough ingredients for a year. Yes, they could grab a handful of nuts or dried fruit, but when it comes to filling bellies with decent meals, some prep is necessary. Also, if your family is used to boxes of cereal or ready-to-go convenience foods, you can make the transition a lot easier by making swaps such as homemade cereal, crackers, potato chips, or whatever your family is used to eating. As I prepare for baby to arrive, I'm focusing on this by making large batches of the items we eat every week. I'm making ready-to-go breakfasts, including breakfast burritos, breakfast sandwiches, yogurt parfaits, instant oatmeal cups, muesli cups, waffles, bacon, muffins, and breakfast sausages. I actually have a video on how I make an entire month of breakfast for our large family in an afternoon, so I will link that below in case you want more details. I'm also making a bunch of bread. This sandwich bread is so easy to make and our family loves it. I have a sourdough recipe that's great too, but this one is good for when you don't have sourdough starter ready to go or you don't have the time that sourdough requires. I usually mix up 2 extra large loaves at a time, but you can adjust this depending on the size of your mixer and how many loaves you want. To make the bread, just add these ingredients to a stand mixer in this order: 2 2/3 cups of warm water, 2/3 cup olive oil, 4 teaspoons salt, 8 cups bread flour, or you can use all-purpose if that's all you have, 5 tablespoons of sugar or honey, and 2 tablespoons active dry yeast. If you're using kamut flour like I do, you will need an extra tablespoon of olive oil and a 1/4 cup more of water. Then let the mixer knead the dough until well blended and smooth, about 8 to 10 minutes. Remove the dough from the mixer and put it into a large greased bowl. Cover and let it rise until doubled, which usually takes a few hours depending on the temperature of my kitchen. After it has doubled, punch it down and put it into your loaf pans. Mine are extra long Pullman pans that should never be greased, but grease yours if needed. And this amount will fill 4 regular loaf pans. Cover and let double again. This rise will go a bit quicker, usually around an hour, and you're aiming for the dough to be just below the top rim of your baking pan before you preheat the oven, and then usually by the time I put it in, it's just going to the top or just above the top of the rim of the pan. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then bake your bread uncovered for about 30 to 35 minutes or until the internal temperature is 190 degrees Fahrenheit and the top is golden brown. After removing them from the oven, remove them from the loaf pans immediately and place on a cooling rack. I then like to rub all the tops with butter. Also, don't get impatient and cut into it too soon, or you will get a doughy or a dense crumb. It's best to let it cool first. Tip number 2 is to get creative with what you have the most of first. Do you have a ridiculous amount of canned pineapple? Maybe consult Pinterest and come up with a list of ways to use those cans up. I personally had a large amount of nuts, seeds, and oats that were over a year old, and no, they're not rancid, they're just fine, but they needed to get used up so that we can cycle in this year's purchases, and granola was the perfect way to do this. My kids absolutely love granola, either with yogurt or milk, and so this is a great staple to make large batches of for quick breakfasts and snacks. This recipe is also very easy to make, and just to warn you, this is a really big batch, so feel free to half or quarter it. This is also a very flexible recipe, and the only thing that really matters is the ratio of wet to dry ingredients. So first, you mix together your dry ingredients in a large bowl. I'm doing 12 cups regular rolled oats, 2 cups of nuts or seeds, and feel free to use whatever your family likes here. I tend to do smaller chopped pieces because my kids don't like full-size nuts in there. So I'm doing a 1/3 cup chopped almonds, a 1/3 cup chopped pecans, and a 1/3 cup sunflower seeds. And then 3 cups of shredded coconut. In a separate smaller bowl, mix together 1/2 cup melted butter, 1 cup melted coconut oil, 1 1/4 cup maple syrup, 3/4 cup brown or maple sugar, 3 teaspoons salt, 2 teaspoons ground cinnamon, and 1 teaspoon vanilla extract. Whisk that together until well blended, and then add it into your dry ingredients. It will look like it's not enough liquid at first, but just keep mixing it up and it will come together. You're just going for everything to be slightly moistened. Then you're going to bake the mixture in a thin layer on parchment paper lined baking sheets at 250 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes to an hour, but keep an eye on it in case your oven cooks differently. You're going for a slight browning on the top, but mostly for it to be nice and crisp. Do not flip or mix it at any point. Then when it comes out of the oven, let it cool completely before breaking it apart and storing it in an airtight container. One thing I noticed I have a lot of and have not figured out how I'm going to even put a dent in my supply of is beans. I have several kinds of beans in large quantities, and apparently we don't eat beans all that often, which is something that needs to change because they are so easy to grow. I know one thing that would help is to can them up so that they are ready to use, because dry beans are a little more intimidating to work with for me, but if you have any suggestions on the meals or snacks that use beans, please let me know in the comments. Okay, tip number 3 is to stop feeling like you have to follow recipes to make a meal. This is something I can get hung up on as well, but frankly, you don't need a recipe to cook up meat, potatoes, and a veggie. There are, of course, other combinations to achieve this as well, but the point is you don't need to overcomplicate it. Take out what you have, defrost the meat, check the fridge, then try to hit a few different food groups and you're good to go. What can be helpful to make this process feel less overwhelming is to focus on learning cooking techniques instead of recipes. So, for example, how to pan fry pork chops or steaks, or how to make a roux or gravy. Just last night, we needed a quick meal, and it was so simple to throw some rice in the Instant Pot and make a quick gravy using canned venison and a few staples. We served it alongside some broccoli, and it was the perfect, uncomplicated meal. Tip number 4, stay ahead of meal prep. I know how easy it is to put meal prep off and then panic at the last minute when you have nothing to feed your hungry family. Lack of preparation is always the reason for calling my husband and asking him to pick up a pizza, or me caving and buying a box of cereal. A good habit that helps tremendously is to start meal prep no later than the mealtime prior. For example, prep breakfast the night before, prep lunch at breakfast, and dinner at lunch. You could also utilize my kitchen power hour system, where I prep both lunch and dinner for the day in 1 hour of carved out time each morning. I have a video that goes more into the system that I'll link below. One of the things I did on this particular day was to mix up a bunch of pizza crusts. Pizza is something that can be thrown together using a variety of different ingredients in a fairly short amount of time, so having this dough ready to go in the freezer or the fridge if you plan to make it within a few days is a huge help. To make pizza dough, simply add to a stand mixer or to a large bowl if you prefer to knead it by hand, 2 cups of warm water, 2 tablespoons active dry yeast, 2 tablespoons of honey, and mix that together until everything is well dissolved and combined. Then slowly add in 5 cups of all-purpose flour and 2 teaspoons of salt as your mixer kneads on low. Turn your mixer up a few notches and let it continue kneading just until all the ingredients are well combined and the dough pulls away from the side. This dough can then be refrigerated for 3 to 4 days or frozen for later. If you're planning on using it right away, let it rise in a greased and covered bowl for 1 to 2 hours, but otherwise you can do this after pulling it out of the fridge or freezer to use. To make pizza, it's as simple then as preheating your oven to 475, sprinkling some parchment paper with cornmeal, rolling out the dough onto the parchment paper, poking a few holes in the crust with a fork, and then topping with your favorite pizza toppings before baking for 10 to 12 minutes. No need to grab fast food, and it's a whole lot healthier too. Another meal prep thing I did was to pre-make a large amount of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches using my homemade bread. On Fridays, I know that it can be hard to get meals made before we head out the door for co-op, so having these sandwiches in the freezer will be very handy. Tip number 5, do a weekly smorgasbord lunch or dinner where you put out all of those odds and ends that don't really come together well. So this could be leftovers or random things hiding in your pantry, fridge, or freezer that maybe you don't have enough of to feed to everyone, or you just haven't been able to fit into a meal. My kids actually really enjoy when we do this, and in fact, I usually have to pre-assign an order that they get to go through the buffet line so that different kids get first pick. Okay friends, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully by next week I'll have a birth story to share. I will be sharing more later in the month on the meals we're eating as part of the Pantry Challenge, so make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss that. You can also find me on Instagram if you want real-time updates on this labor and birth of our baby and more meal ideas.